The silver clinked once. Bumpy stared at the red smear on his plate like it had a name. Across the dining room, laughter thinned. In Harlem, blood at dinner meant someone was inviting war. The fork slid through the meat like it had been waiting. Bumpy Johnson didn't hurry. He never did. The room moved around him, waiters weaving between tables, glasses chiming, a soft piano staying polite in the corner. But at Bumpy's table, time took its hat off. He sat straight, shoulders loose, dark suit fitted the way Harlem demanded. Clean, quiet, sure. His hands were steady. Not gentle steady. The kind of steady that told a man across the room, don't gamble on noise. I'm not built for it. The restaurant was one of the few places left where people still believed in rules, not written rules, not shouted rules, the kind of rules that lived in the eyes of the owner and the posture of the doorman, the kind of rules you only violated once. Tonight, even the air seemed to know them. No fighting, no talking business too loud, no disrespecting. The help. And if Bumpy Johnson ate here, you didn't stare. You didn't test your courage by looking him up and down. You minded your plate. You minded your family. You minded your own heartbeat. A waiter set a glass near Bumpy's right hand without clinking the rim. That was respect. Not performance. Precision. Bumpy nodded once, not a thank you, not a greeting. More like a receipt. I saw you. Keep the peace. Across the room, men with work on them kept their voices low. Small-time numbers runners. A couple of longshoremen. A woman with a fur collar and eyes that didn't flinch. They were the kind of Harlem people who didn't ask what Bumpy did. They asked whether he was calm. Because calm meant the street would be calm. Tonight, he had brought no crowd. That was another kind of power. The kind you didn't need witnesses for. The owner, Mr. DeLuca, stayed near the front like a man guarding a church. He had made his money feeding the neighborhood, not gossiping about it. Years ago, he'd learned the difference between customers and storms. He treated Bumpy like a storm you didn't insult and didn't try to outrun. You just made sure your foundation was strong. Bumpy lifted his fork again, turned the bite once, and paused. Something was wrong. Not wrong like spoiled food. Not wrong like a bad cook. Wrong like a whisper in a locked room. Wrong like a man who walks into your house and doesn't take his shoes off. He set the fork down gently. The plate was white, clean, a simple thing, meant to disappear beneath the meal. But there near the edge was a smear. Thin at first, then thicker, like a thumb had dragged something wet across porcelain. Red. Not sauce, not wine, not beet. Blood had a certain honesty to it. It didn't pretend to be anything else. Bumpy's eyes didn't widen. He didn't call anybody over. He didn't move like a man surprised. His face stayed as still as a statue that had seen too many prayers. He only breathed. Once quiet through the nose like he was tasting the room instead of the food. At the nearest table, a young man laughed too loud at a joke that wasn't funny. It died in his throat when he noticed the silence at Bumpy's table. The laugh didn't finish. It just folded itself and sat down. The piano kept playing, but softer now, as if the pianist's hands had begun to fear the keys. Bumpy reached for his napkin and dabbed the corner of his mouth even though he didn't need to. The motion was small, controlled, and old habit of manners, but it gave him time. Time was everything. He looked at the smear again. Blood at a man's dinner was never a kitchen accident. Not in a place like this. Not in Harlem. Not with him sitting where he sat. It was a signal. A test. A warning delivered in the most intimate way. We can reach your mouth. He didn't touch the blood. He didn't taste it. He didn't flinch. He let it sit there and speak. Then he lifted his eyes slowly and scanned the room without turning his head much. The restaurant held its breath. People pretended not to watch while watching with every nerve they had. The doorman near the front shifted his weight, hand drifting near his jacket like a habit he wished he didn't have to use. Mr. DeLuca looked up from behind the host's hand and froze in place, his face tightening, trying to read what Bumpy's face refused to show. Bumpy's gaze moved past the tables, past the bar, past the curtains that hid the kitchen. He didn't look for a guilty face. Guilty faces were for amateurs. The guilty man usually looked away too late or stared too hard. Bumpy looked for a change in rhythm, a waiter who suddenly forgot how to carry a tray, a couple at the back who stopped chewing, a man whose hand touched his pocket when he wasn't cold, nothing obvious, which meant the sender was either careful or confident. Bumpy sat back a fraction, letting the chair take him like he owned it. He picked up his glass, took a measured sip. The gesture wasn't casual. It was deliberate. It told the room, I am not rattled. If you're waiting on me to jump, you'll be waiting a long time. He placed the glass down without a sound. Then, and only then, he raised 2 fingers, not high, not dramatic. Just enough. The waiter who had served him, an older man named Samuel, face lined with years of carrying other men's moods, noticed immediately. Samuel didn't rush. He approached like a man stepping into sacred ground. Yes, Mr. Johnson? Samuel said softly. Bumpy didn't look at Samuel's face right away. He looked at Samuel's hands. Clean hands. Trembling just slightly. Bumpy spoke in a calm, low voice that didn't travel far. That was another rule. Power shouldn't need a microphone. Who carried this plate? He asked. Samuel swallowed. I did, sir, from the pass. Bumpy's eyes lifted to meet his, not accusing, measuring. And before you? Bumpy asked. Samuel hesitated for a heartbeat too long. The runner brought it from the kitchen, Samuel said. Young boy, new. Bumpy nodded once, like he'd expected that. Did you see anyone touch it? Bumpy asked. Samuel shook his head quickly, then corrected himself slower. No, sir. Bumpy's gaze slid toward the curtain again. Bring Mr. DeLuca, Bumpy said. Samuel didn't ask why. A man with questions was a man who didn't survive in Harlem hospitality. Samuel walked away. Not fast, but his spine had stiffened. The message was already moving. Bumpy looked back at the plate. The blood sat there like a signature, like a promise. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small handkerchief, white, folded sharp. He didn't wipe the blood. That wasn't his job. Wiping it would make it disappear. And he wanted it to stay. He set the handkerchief beside the plate instead. Clean and bright, a quiet contrast. Clean beside stained, order beside insult. Then he waited. A man who truly controlled a room didn't fill the silence. He owned it. Mr. The DeLuca approached, trying to keep his face steady, trying to keep his dignity from shaking loose. He stopped at a respectful distance. Mr. Johnson, he began, voice cautious. Is everything? Bumpy raised one hand, palm down, not rude. Final. He pointed at the plate without touching it. Mr. DeLuca's eyes followed. His face drained. His lips parted, but no words came out at first. The blood looked louder on white porcelain. Bumpy spoke again, calm as a judge reading a sentence. This place got rules, he said. Yes. DeLuca whispered. Bumpy's gaze never moved from him. Tonight, Bumpy said. Somebody decided. Your rules don't matter. DeLuca's throat bobbed. Mr. Johnson, I swear to you. Bumpy cut him off with quiet, not anger. I ain't saying you did it, Bumpy said. I'm saying it happened at your table. DeLuca's eyes flicked around the room, fearful, embarrassed, furious. Like a man realizing his church had been defiled. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. His voice lowered even more, so the words felt like they belonged only to them. Blood at dinner, Bumpy said, means somebody wants my attention. DeLuca's hands clenched at his sides. "What do you want me to do?" Bumpy held his gaze. "Close the curtain," he said. "And bring me the boy who ran the plate," DeLuca blinked. "Right now?" Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Right now," he repeated. The owner turned, signaling. The curtain to the kitchen was drawn tighter. The room dimmed in spirit. Even though the lights stayed the same, Bumpy sat back again, calm and certain, because he understood something the whole neighborhood had forgotten in its comfort. This wasn't just about food. This was about who was allowed to touch the piece, and whoever had placed that blood on his plate wasn't asking to be heard. They were asking to be dealt with. The curtain closed like a verdict, not loud, not rushed. Just a heavy piece of fabric sliding across a brass rail, sealing the kitchen off from the dining room the way a courtroom door seals the accused from the street. And just like that, the restaurant changed temperature. No one stood up. No one ran. Harlem people knew better than to panic inside a room Bumpy Johnson was still sitting in. Panic suggested chaos. And chaos suggested Bumpy had lost control. He hadn't. He sat exactly where he'd been, shoulders easy, eyes half-lidded, like a man listening to distant thunder. The plate remained in front of him untouched, the red smear drying slowly under the lights. Mr. DeLuca returned first, his face composed but pale around the mouth. "The boy's being brought," he said quietly. Bumpy nodded once. "Good." He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Sit." DeLuca hesitated. Owners didn't usually sit with Bumpy unless invited twice. Tonight, he sat on the first invitation, lowering himself carefully like the chair might judge him. Bumpy poured water into DeLuca's glass himself. That small act sent a ripple through the room, power pouring for responsibility. "You built this place honest," Bumpy said calmly. DeLuca swallowed. "I tried." "You did more than try," Bumpy corrected. "You kept noise out. You fed families. You gave the neighborhood somewhere clean to breathe." DeLuca's eyes flickered with gratitude and fear. Bumpy leaned back slightly. "That's why this matters," he said, glancing at the plate. DeLuca followed his gaze and looked away just as quickly. "I'll handle it," DeLuca said, too fast. Bumpy shook his head once. "No," he said softly. "You'll watch it get handled." The distinction landed heavy, because this wasn't kitchen business anymore. This was neighborhood business. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet in layers. At the bar, glasses were being cleaned that were already clean. Two longshoremen pretended to argue about baseball but hadn't spoken in minutes. A couple at the window kept cutting their food into smaller and smaller pieces without eating it. They weren't afraid of violence. They were afraid of disruption. Bumpy Johnson represented order. Criminal order, maybe, but order all the same. If he reacted wildly, the street would react worse. He reached for his glass again, taking another slow sip. Then he spoke without turning his head. "Samuel." The older waiter appeared almost instantly, like he'd been waiting to be called. "Yes, Mr. Johnson." "Close the front door," Bumpy said. Samuel blinked. "Close it?" "For now," Bumpy said. "No one leaves. No one new comes in." Samuel nodded quickly and moved. The doorman locked the entrance discreetly, flipping the sign to private event. No announcement was made, but everyone felt it. They were witnesses now. Moments later, the kitchen curtain shifted again. A young runner stepped through, guided by a cook whose hand rested firmly on his shoulder. The boy couldn't have been more than 19. Thin frame, nervous eyes. Apron still dusted with flour. He looked at the room like he'd walked into church mid-sermon when he saw Bumpy sitting there. He froze. The cook gave him a small push forward and retreated, disappearing behind the curtain again. The boy stood alone. Bumpy didn't speak. Immediately. Silence was interrogation before questions even started. What's your name? Bumpy asked finally. Eddie, the boy said. Eddie Collins. Bumpy nodded slightly. You new here, Eddie? Yes, sir. 2 weeks. You like working here? Eddie glanced at DeLuca, then back at Bumpy. Yes, sir. Bumpy gestured toward the chair beside DeLuca. Sit. Eddie hesitated harder than DeLuca had. I am working. Sir, sit, Bumpy repeated. Still calm, Eddie obeyed. Bumpy slid the plate forward slightly, not toward the boy, just enough for him to see it clearly. Eddie's eyes dropped to the smear. His breath caught instantly. Not confusion, recognition. Bumpy noticed that. You carried this plate, Bumpy said. Yes, sir. From the kitchen pass to Samuel to me. Yes, sir. Bumpy leaned forward slightly, elbows near the table but not resting. Did you see that blood before you carried it? Eddie shook his head fast. Too fast. No, sir. Bumpy didn't react. He simply watched the boy breathe. Take your time. Bumpy said quietly. Truth don't run away if you walk to it. Eddie swallowed hard. I didn't see it, he repeated, slower this time. Bumpy studied his face. The boy wasn't lying cleanly, but he wasn't lying like a criminal either. He was scared of something behind the curtain. Not at the table. Bumpy leaned back again, eyes drifting toward the kitchen entrance. How long that chef been here? Bumpy asked DeLuca. 7 years, DeLuca replied. Best cook I ever had. Name's Arturo. Reliable, trusted, quiet. Bumpy filed that away. He looked back at Eddie. When you picked up the plate, Bumpy asked, who was at the pass? Eddie's lips parted, then closed. The whole restaurant leaned into that silence without moving. Talk? Bumpy said, not louder, just heavier. Eddie's voice dropped to a whisper. No one, sir. DeLuca frowned. That's impossible. Eddie nodded nervously. Chef stepped away. Saw he'd be back in a second. Bumpy's eyes sharpened just slightly, the first visible edge he'd shown all night. And the plate was already there? Bumpy asked. Yes, sir. You touched it? Yes. You see anyone near it? Eddie hesitated again. Longer. This time, Bumpy didn't interrupt. Fear had to surface on its own. I thought I saw someone by the cold room door, Eddie said quietly. The words changed the air instantly. DeLuca stiffened. Who? Eddie shook his head. Didn't see clear, just a shape. Thought it was one of the prep guys. Bumpy leaned forward again, voice still calm but colder now. Cold room door open or closed? Half open, Eddie said. Bumpy sat still for a moment, processing. Cold rooms were sacred ground in kitchens. No one lingered there without reason. No one left them open carelessly. He looked back at the plate one last time. Blood on porcelain. Chef missing from the pass. Shadow near the cold room. Pieces were arranging themselves without being forced. Bumpy stood slowly. Every chair in the restaurant seemed to tighten at once. He buttoned his jacket, not hurried, not dramatic. Just preparation. DeLuca rose too. Mr. Johnson, maybe I should. Bumpy raised a hand slightly. You stay, he said. DeLuca froze. Bumpy looked down at Eddie. You did right telling it straight, Bumpy said. Eddie nodded, relief and terror mixing in his face. Bumpy turned toward the kitchen curtain, then he paused and spoke without looking back. Samuel. Yes, Mr. Johnson. Keep everybody seated. Samuel nodded. Bumpy rested his hand briefly on the back of his chair. The chair he'd been served in, respected in, tested in. Then he said quietly, if somebody put blood on my plate, it means they wanted me to come looking. He pulled the curtain aside. Heat spilled out. Steel clattered. The kitchen breathed like a machine. Bumpy stepped inside without hesitation, because whatever waited behind that cold room door. had already crossed from insult into consequence. The kitchen didn't welcome men like Bumpy Johnson. It tolerated them. Heat hit his face first, thick, oily, alive. The air was heavy with onions, garlic, and the clean sting of bleach somebody had used too recently. Pots hissed. A knife struck wood in a steady rhythm that sounded too calm for the moment they were in. Cooks moved like they were trying to look busy enough to be innocent. Bumpy stepped through the curtain, and the room shifted around him. The way water shifts when a stone enters. No one greeted him. No one challenged him. They just made room. DeLuca had a line of men in their working men, kitchen men, hands that fed Harlem. They stared at Bumpy with a mixture of respect and dread. A kitchen had its own pride, but pride didn't argue when inevitability walked in wearing a suit. Bumpy's eyes swept the space once. Slow and clinical. He didn't search for a villain. He searched for imbalance. A station too clean. A cook wiping the same spot twice. A man who couldn't keep his hands from his apron. Near the back, the cold room door sat slightly ajar, exactly as the boy had said. A sliver of pale light cut through the steam like the edge of a blade. Bumpy moved toward it. Without rushing, DeLuca's head chef should have been in command, calling times, watching plates, keeping the fire organized. But there was no voice carrying through the clatter. No authority in the kitchen, only motion. Bumpy stopped beside the pass where plates were staged, one of them clean. White sat ready. He didn't touch it. He leaned in just enough to smell. Faint metallic note hung under the food smells, not from meat. From blood. Bumpy straightened and looked to the nearest cook, an older man with a thick mustache, hands rough, eyes too watchful. "Where's Arturo?" Bumpy asked. The cook's mouth opened, but the answer didn't come easily. I don't know," he said. Bumpy held his gaze. "That ain't an answer," Bumpy said calmly. The man swallowed. He went to the back to check stock. Bumpy nodded once. "How long ago?" The cook's eyes flicked toward the cold room, then back. "Maybe 10 minutes." Bumpy listened to the way he said it. 10 minutes could be truth or a prayer. Bumpy turned slightly and addressed the room without raising his voice. "Everybody keep doing what you doing," he said, "but keep your eyes open." No one moved. Slower. No one moved faster. They just moved. Carefully, Bumpy stepped toward the cold room. A younger cook, maybe 25, shifted into his path without meaning to. Instinct, protection, fear. The boy realized what he'd done the moment he did it. He stopped frozen. Bumpy didn't threaten him, didn't glare. He simply looked at him like a father looks at a child about to touch a hot stove. "You want to tell me something?" Bumpy asked. The young cook's throat worked. I just, he stammered. Bumpy waited. Time pressed against the boy's ribs. Finally, the cook whispered, "It's cold in there, sir." Bumpy nodded. "Cold don't scare me," he said. Then he stepped around him. The cold room door gave a small squeak as Bumpy pushed it open wider. The hinge sounded like it hadn't been oiled in a long time. He didn't rush inside. He stood at the threshold and let his eyes adjust. Inside, the world was different. The warm kitchen died behind him. The cold room's air was clean and sharp, tasting like metal and frost. Boxes were stacked along the walls. Sides of meat hung on hooks. A faint hum of machinery vibrated through the floor. And then he saw it, a man's shoe. Black leather, stiff with cold. Bumpy didn't move for a second. In the doorway behind him, the kitchen noise seemed to shrink, as if the room had sensed what he was looking at and didn't want to disturb it. Bumpy stepped. The cold bit his cheeks. His breath fogged briefly and then thinned. The body was sitting against the back wall, knees bent slightly, head angled like the man had fallen asleep upright. Except sleep didn't freeze a man's face like that. The head chef Arturo was wearing his chef's jacket, buttons still done. His apron was tied. His hands were placed neatly on his lap, palms down, like someone had arranged him for a photograph. His eyes were open, not wide with terror. Open, like a man forced to watch something he couldn't stop. Bumpy's gaze dropped to the chef's throat. There was a line there. Thin, dark. Not a wild slash, a controlled cut, a professional cut. Bumpy looked around the cold room. There was no struggle. No knocked over boxes, no broken hooks. No chaos. That was the loudest thing in the room. A man had been killed in silence. Bumpy crouched slightly, his suit creasing as he lowered himself into the cold. He didn't touch the body yet. He studied. The blood at Bumpy's plate had been fresh. That meant someone had taken it from this room, recently, deliberately. Enough to mark a plate, not enough to splatter. A small cruelty. Bumpy's eyes traced the floor, near the chef's left boot. There was a faint scuff like a shoe had pivoted quickly. Not a struggle. A turn. A leave. Bumpy leaned closer. The chef's jacket was clean except for one dark patch near the collarbone where blood had seeped and then thickened. In the cold, Bumpy straightened slowly. He spoke without turning his head, voice calm, carrying through the open doorway. DeLuca. The owner stepped into the threshold, stopping short as the cold hit him. He looked past Bumpy, saw the body, and his face collapsed. No. DeLuca whispered. His hand reached for the door frame like the room might tilt. Bumpy didn't let him enter fully. Stay there, Bumpy said softly. DeLuca's eyes watered. Whether from cold or grief, it didn't matter. He's dead, DeLuca choked. Bumpy nodded once. Yes. DeLuca's voice cracked. Why would someone? Bumpy's eyes never left the chef. Because he was useful, Bumpy said quietly. Or because he refused to be. That landed hard. Bumpy stepped aside a fraction so DeLuca could see more. Clearly without coming in. The body looked wrong not because it was dead, but because it was composed. This wasn't a killing. It was a message arranged with care. Bumpy turned and looked at DeLuca now. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were hard. Who got keys to this room? Bumpy asked. DeLuca swallowed. Me, Arturo, 2 prep guys. Names, Bumpy sighed. DeLuca's lips trembled. Ricky and Lionel. Bumpy nodded. Bring them, he said. DeLuca hesitated. Mr. Johnson. I don't want trouble. Bumpy's voice cut through softly. Trouble already inside your freezer, he sighed. Now bring them. DeLuca turned and hurried away, shouting something into the kitchen that came out, broken and panicked. Bumpy looked back at the chef. He stepped closer and finally reached out 2 fingers touching the chef's wrist. Ice-cold. Dead. Long enough for the cold to do its work, but not long enough for the blood to be old. Bumpy withdrew his hand. He noticed something else then. A faint smear on the chef's apron near the waist, like a handprint had brushed it. Not bloody. Just damp, as if gloved fingers had pressed. Gloves. Bumpy lifted his eyes and scanned the cold room again. A hook near the ceiling had a rag hanging on it. Strange place for a rag. Bumpy reached up and pulled it down. It was a kitchen towel clean, except for a small dark stain at one corner. Not much. Almost nothing, but enough. Bumpy held it between his fingers and brought it close. Blood. The same metallic. Honesty. He folded it once and slipped it into his jacket pocket without ceremony. He wasn't collecting evidence for a courtroom. He was collecting truth for Harlem. Behind him, DeLuca returned, dragging 2 men into the doorway. They were both in kitchen clothes. Both pale now. One had flour on his sleeves. The other had sweat on his upper lip even in the cold. Bumpy looked at them the way a man looks at strangers standing on his property. Ricky, DeLuca said shakily. Lionel. Bumpy didn't ask which was which. He let the fear identify them. Man with flour stepped forward slightly. Mr. Johnson, I don't know what. Bumpy lifted a hand. Don't talk fast, he said calmly. Fast talk is for people hiding. The flour man swallowed and shut his mouth. Bumpy pointed toward the body without looking. You know why I'm here, he said. Neither man answered. Bumpy's voice stayed low. Somebody used this room like it was theirs, he said. Somebody took blood from that man and put it on my plate. He paused just long enough for them to feel the weight of his name. That kind of disrespect got a price, Bumpy said. The sweaty man Lionel maybe spoke quickly despite Bumpy's. Warning, it wasn't us, Mr. Johnson, we swear. We've been out front cutting vegetables. Bumpy's eyes slid to him slow. You cut vegetables with gloves? Bumpy asked. Lionel blinked. Sometimes ain't tonight, Bumpy said. Lionel's mouth closed. Bumpy shifted his focus to the flour man. Ricky, DeLuca whispered, as if naming him might anchor him. Bumpy watched. Ricky's hands. They were trembling, not with guilt, with fear of someone else. Bumpy's voice softened in a way that was almost more dangerous. Somebody came back here, Bumpy said. And you saw it. Ricky shook his head, but it wasn't convincing. Bumpy stepped forward one pace, just enough for the cold room to feel smaller. You don't have to protect the devil, Bumpy said quietly. He don't protect nobody. Ricky's eyes darted to DeLuca, then to the kitchen beyond. Bumpy noticed where his eyes avoided. The door. The kitchen. Who was out there? Ricky finally spoke, voice trembling. There was a man, he whispered. Bumpy didn't react outwardly. What man? He asked. Ricky swallowed hard, forcing the words out like broken glass. A man in a nice coat, he said. Not kitchen. Not neighborhood. He came in like he belonged. DeLuca's voice rose in panic. Who let him in? Ricky shook his head. He didn't come through front. He came through the back hall. By the deliveries. Bumpy's eyes narrowed slightly. Back hall. Deliveries. That meant someone had access. Someone had planned entry. Someone knew the building. Bumpy spoke like a man concluding a thought. So he wasn't trying to hide, he said softly. He was trying to be seen. Ricky nodded, tears forming now. He told us to keep working. Bumpy's jaw tightened, just a fraction. Who was he? Bumpy asked. Ricky's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know his name, he said, but he had a ring. Bumpy held still. What kind of ring? Ricky's eyes squeezed shut like he was afraid to say it. A big one, he whispered. Gold with a lion's head. Bumpy's gaze shifted to the chef again. A lion's head ring was a signature. A calling card. Not Harlem. Not Italian neighborhood either. Something else. Something with money and arrogance. Bumpy nodded once. Slowly, he turned toward the doorway, eyes cold as the air around him. DeLuca, he said. Yes? Bumpy's voice was calm, but final. Open your front door, he said. Let people go home. DeLuca blinked. But Bumpy cut him off with one sentence. Tonight ain't their trouble, he said. It's mine. He stepped out of the cold room, back into the heat, and as the kitchen steam wrapped around him, Bumpy Johnson didn't look like a man chasing revenge. He looked like a man returning order to his neighborhood. One quiet consequence at a time, the front door opened again, and the restaurant exhaled like it had been underwater. People filed out and in orderly hushcoats lifted, chairs pushed in, hats adjusted with hands that were trying not to shake. Nobody said the words out loud, but the understanding moved from table to table like a folded note passed in church. Something happened, and another note under it. Bumpy's handling it. On the sidewalk outside, Harlem took the news the way it always did, quick, quiet, and in pieces. A man leaned toward another man and spoke without moving his lips. A woman pulled her scarf tighter and kept walking, eyes forward. A delivery boy pedaled faster than he needed to, like speed could protect him from hearing Dot by the time the last customer reached the corner. The story had already changed 3 times. First it was a kitchen. Accident. Then it was a robbery. Then it was a message. By midnight, it became what the city always wanted it to be, a legend. Inside, the restaurant stayed open only in spirit. DeLuca locked the doors again, pulled down the shades, and told his staff to go home. The ones who stayed did so because their loyalty was older than their fear. Bumpy stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, coat buttoned, hands at his sides. The heat didn't soften him. If anything, it made his calm seem sharper. He looked at DeLuca like a man looking at a neighbor whose roof had caught fire. "You'll have police questions," Bumpy said. DeLuca's face tightened. "I don't want police in here." Bumpy nodded once. "Then don't lie to them. Tell them you found him. Tell them you don't know who did it." "That part is true." DeLuca swallowed hard. "And if they ask about you?" Bumpy's eyes stayed level. "Say you served me dinner." "That's all." DeLuca hesitated. "Mr. Johnson, whoever did this, they did it to hurt you." Bumpy's voice came like gravel, slow and steady. "They did it to see if Harlem still belongs to me," he said. "That's different." He turned and walked out the back through the delivery hall Ricky had mentioned. Narrow corridor. Brick walls. Smell of wet cardboard and old grease. A place where footsteps echoed even when you tried to walk soft. At the far end, the metal door to the alley stood half closed. A chain hung loose from its latch, unlocked on purpose, not forgotten. Bumpy touched it once, barely moving it. Unlocked. Meant invitation. Somebody wanted him to see how easy it was. He stepped into the alley. Night air hit his face like a clean slap. Snow flurries drifted lazily between the buildings, catching on fire escapes, disappearing into darkness. The city's noise was muffled here, as if the alley was a pocket where secrets collected. At the mouth of the alley, a black sedan sat idling with its lights off. It wasn't hiding. It was waiting. Bumpy didn't reach for a gun. He didn't call for backup. He simply walked forward with his hands visible, coat collar up, shoes steady on wet pavement. The sedan's passenger window rolled down an inch. Man's voice drifted out smooth, confident, not Harlem. "Mr. Johnson." Bumpy stopped a few feet away. He didn't lean in. He didn't offer courtesy. He stared at the dark shape behind the glass. "Who you?" Bumpy asked. The voice chuckled softly. "Just somebody who appreciates order." Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Order don't come with butchered cooks," he said. The window lowered a little more. A pale face appeared, sharp cheekbones, clean shave, eyes that smiled without warmth. The man wore a fine coat and a fedora with a crease too perfect. On his right hand, glinting even in the dark, was a ring. Lion's head. Bumpy's gaze fixed on it for one quiet beat, then lifted back to the man's eyes. "So you wanted me to see it," Bumpy said. The man's smile widened. "I wanted you to understand it." Bumpy spoke calmly, like a man asking about the weather. "You killed that chef?" The man shrugged slightly. "He was employed in a place that serves you, that makes him part of your machine." Bumpy's voice stayed even. He was a man feeding families. The man's eyes flickered annoyance, quickly hidden. "Families don't matter without authority." Bumpy leaned forward a fraction, not aggressive, just present. "Harlem authority ain't yours," he said. The man's smile hardened. "We'll see." Bumpy's face remained controlled. "You came into my neighborhood through a back door," Bumpy said. "That's a coward's way." The man laughed quietly. "A smart man's way. The front door belongs to whoever can keep it." Bumpy's eyes didn't blink. "You ain't built for Harlem," Bumpy said. "You talk too much." The man's Smile faltered for the first time. Then he leaned closer to the window, voice dropping into something like a whisper. People are saying you've gotten comfortable, he said. Saying you're soft now, that you let Italians cut your deals, that you've forgotten fear. Bumpy's tone remained calm, but the air around him tightened. People say a lot, Bumpy said. The man tapped the lion ring lightly against the window frame. A deliberate little sound. This, he said, is fear. Bumpy didn't flinch. That's jewelry, Bumpy replied. Fear don't need gold. The man's jaw tightened. You think you can keep pretending Harlem is yours? You think respect is enough? Bumpy's voice softened almost tenderly. Respect is everything, he said. You just ain't earned none. The man's eyes darkened. He turned slightly as if speaking to someone inside the car, someone unseen. Then he looked back at Bumpy with that practiced smile again. This isn't personal, he said. It's business, a message, a warning. Bumpy nodded once slow. I heard it, he said. The man watched him carefully. And? Bumpy took one step closer, stopping just outside arm's reach. His voice was quiet enough that the alley had to listen. You picked a cook, Bumpy said. Not a soldier. Not a thief. You picked a man with flour on his hands. He paused. That tells me something about you, Bumpy continued. You don't want to fight me. You want to scare my people. The man's smile thinned. Scared people are useful. Bumpy's eyes went flat. Not in Harlem, he said, for a moment. The alley held them like a courtroom. Then the man's tone shifted, less playful, more sharp. You're going to make a mistake, he said. You're going to reach too far. And when you do, your own neighborhood will turn on you. Bumpy's face remained calm, but his voice carried a quiet certainty that felt older than the city. My neighborhood don't turn on me, he said. They turn to me. The man stared, searching for weakness. Bumpy gave him none. Finally, the man leaned back. The window began to rise. Tell your people to stay out of my way, the man said through the narrowing gap. Tell DeLuca the restaurant is under new consideration. The window sealed shut. The sedan began to roll forward, slow at first, then faster. It slipped out of the alley like it had never been there. Bumpy stood in the snow and watched it go, his breath steady. He didn't chase it. Chasing was for men who needed the last word. Bumpy let the enemy keep his little performance, because Harlem would remember who left in the dark and who stayed standing. He turned back toward the restaurant. Inside, DeLuca was waiting near the kitchen door, eyes wet, hands clenched. He was here, DeLuca whispered, already knowing. Bumpy nodded once. DeLuca's voice shook. What do we do? Bumpy looked at the restaurant, the clean tables, the quiet chairs, the place Harlem families trusted. Then he looked at DeLuca. We do what Harlem always does, Bumpy said calmly. We keep the peace, and we punish the ones who touch it. DeLuca's eyes widened. How? Bumpy's gaze went distant, thoughtful. Not loud, he said. Not fast. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded towel from the cold room. The blood stain was small, almost polite. He held it for DeLuca to see, then folded it again and put it away. This, Bumpy said, is enough. DeLuca swallowed. Enough for what? Bumpy's voice turned low, final. Enough to find who thinks they can wear a lion in Harlem, he said. And in that moment, DeLuca understood something that made his fear turn into faith. The insult had been public, but Bumpy's rules were private, and private rules were the ones that never failed. Bumpy Johnson didn't move that night like a man chasing revenge. He moved like a man arranging furniture in a room he already owned. By morning, Harlem was awake but quieter than usual. Word had spread without needing details. A cook was dead. Blood had touched Bumpy's plate. An outsider had walked through a back door like he belonged. That last part mattered most because Harlem didn't fear violence, it feared disrespect. Bumpy walked Lenox Avenue alone, coat buttoned, hat low, hands empty. Store owners who saw him didn't call out, they simply nodded, subtle and solemn. A barber paused mid-cut just long enough to meet Bumpy's eyes in the mirror, a silent pledge. We're steady. Bumpy didn't stop to talk. Talking too early would make this emotional. And emotion made mistakes. Instead, he visited places that didn't look important to outsiders, but were. Pillars in Harlem spine. The bakery that opened before sunrise. The numbers office that never wrote anything down. The church steps where old men sat even in winter. At each place, Bumpy didn't explain what happened. He asked one question only. You see a man wearing a lion's head ring? Some shook their heads. Some hesitated. Some answered in riddles the street understood. But by noon, Harlem had given him a map not of streets, but of sightings. A man in a fine coat near the Savoy, a black sedan seen twice near the freight yards. Yards. Delivery driver paid cash to forget a license plate. Nothing loud. Nothing direct. But enough. Bumpy didn't send soldiers. He didn't send threats. He sent invitations. By evening, 3 men who ran freight routes, 2 who handled nightclub security, and 1 who collected rent for half a block had all received the same quiet message. Come sit with Bumpy tonight. No location written. They knew where. DeLuca's restaurant reopened after sunset, not for customers, but for counsel. Tables pushed aside, chairs arranged in a loose circle. Lights dimmed low, like the place understood the difference between feeding stomachs and feeding order. Bumpy sat at the same table, where the blood had appeared. The plate was gone, but the memory of it sat with him. One by one, the men arrived. No bodyguards, no noise. Men who understood that being summoned wasn't humiliation, it was responsibility. They greeted Bumpy with nods, not words, and took their seats. When the last chair filled, Bumpy spoke. You all heard what happened, he said. They nodded. No cook should die in a place feeding this neighborhood, Bumpy continued. That's crossing a line. A freight runner named Caleb leaned forward slightly. Name the man, he said. We'll handle it. Bumpy shook his head once. No, he said. We don't chase ghosts. We make ghosts come to us. The men listened carefully. Bumpy reached into his pocket and placed the folded towel on the table. He opened it slowly, revealing the small dried stain. This blood ain't just from a dead man, Bumpy said. It's from a message. He let that settle. Man wearing a lion's head ring been moving through our doors like he measuring us, Bumpy continued. He thinks killing a cook scares Harlem. A low murmur of anger rippled. Bumpy raised a hand slightly. Anger quieted instantly. We don't answer disrespect with noise, he said. We answer it with inevitability. He looked around the circle, making sure each man felt the weight of what came next. I want word spread, Bumpy said. Not loud, not threatening, just clear. What word? Asked one of the nightclub men. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. That any business wanting protection in Harlem comes through me, he said. No new collectors. No new investors. No new muscle. Anybody approaches, send them to dinner here. Understanding dawned across the room. He wasn't hunting the lion, he was baiting it. Caleb nodded slowly. He'll come if he wants territory. Bumpy nodded back. He wants to be seen. Ricky said that. That's vanity. Vanity was a weakness Harlem knew how to exploit. One of the rent collectors spoke up. And if he don't come? Bumpy leaned back slightly, hands resting on the table's edge. Then his business starves, he said. Because nothing moves. Here without us. The plan wasn't violent. It was economic suffocation wrapped in politeness. 3 nights later, the trap closed itself. The Lion Ring man came to dinner. Not sneaking, not hiding. He walked through the front door like he owned the floorboards. Same fine coat. Same controlled smile. Same ring glinting under the lights. But this time, the restaurant wasn't full of families. It was full of Harlems. Structure. Men who ran numbers. Men who ran docks. Men who ran night security. All seated calmly, eating quietly, watching without staring. The man noticed immediately. He paused just inside the doorway. Bumpy didn't wave him over. He simply sat at his table, waiting. The man approached anyway, pride pulling him forward. He stopped across from Bumpy's table, glancing around the room once more. Looks like a meeting, he said lightly. Bumpy gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, he said. Man sat. No menu was offered. No waiter approached. Silence filled the space like water rising. The man tried to keep his smile. You arranged this? He asked. Bumpy nodded once. You wanted to be seen, Bumpy said. Now you are. The man's eyes flicked around again, noticing how no one avoided looking at him anymore. They weren't staring with fear. They were measuring him like livestock. You think this intimidates me? He asked. Bumpy shook his head. No, he sighed. This educates you. He leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just inevitable. You walked through a back door, Bumpy said. Killed a cook, put blood on my plate. That was your lesson. The man's smile thinned. And this? He asked. Bumpy's voice dropped lower. This is mine. He gestured subtly around the room. Every man you see feeds this neighborhood. Bumpy said, You threaten one, you threaten all. The man's jaw tightened. I don't answer to you, he said. Bumpy nodded calmly. You don't have to, he said. You just have to leave. The man blinked. Leave? Bumpy's gaze hardened just enough to be unmistakable. No collections. No intimidation. No back doors. Harlem ain't territory, it's community. The man laughed once, sharp. You think I came alone? He said. Bumpy didn't react. You think men like me walk into rooms unprotected? The man pressed. Bumpy leaned back, completely at ease. You did tonight, he said. The man's eyes flicked toward the windows instinctively. Outside. The street looked normal, but the men inside knew what the outsider didn't. No car waited for him. No muscle stood at corners. Because Harlem had closed ranks hours earlier. Not violently. Quietly. The man realized it then, the same realization DeLuca had felt. He wasn't in enemy territory. He was in controlled territory. Bumpy spoke one last time. You came wearing a lion, he said. But lions hunt alone. Harlem hunts together. The man swallowed first sign of real fear. Bumpy's voice softened, almost merciful. Go back through the front door, he said. Same way you should have come the first time. No threats. No gun. No spectacle. Just inevitability. The man stood slowly. He looked around the room again, this time not measuring power, but respecting it. Then he left. No one followed him. No one needed to, because humiliation in front of structure traveled farther than violence ever could. Bumpy remained seated, calm as ever. The insult had been answered. Not with chaos, but with controlled domination. Harlem would remember longer than blood. The restaurant reopened fully the following week. Same tables, same piano. Same smell of garlic and polished wood. But the air carried something heavier now, not fear. Assurance. People came back slowly at first. Families, couples, dock workers still wearing salt on their coats. They sat, they ate, and they spoke in that quiet Harlem way that respected places where peace had been defended. Nobody mentioned the chef out loud, but flowers appeared near the kitchen entrance. Small gestures. Respectful ones. DeLuca kept Arturo's knives mounted on the wall, polished, untouched. A reminder that the man who fed the neighborhood was still part of its story. Bumpy came back to same table, same posture, no bodyguards. When he sat down, the room didn't stiffen like before. It settled like something broken had been repaired properly. Samuel served him again. Hands steady this time. "No trouble tonight, Mr. Johnson," he said softly. Bumpy nodded once. "Good," he replied. Across Harlem, word had already traveled. Farther than police reports ever could. A man tried to scare the neighborhood by spilling innocent blood. Bumpy answered without shouting, without chasing, without spectacle. He simply reminded everyone what real authority looked like. Not loud, not cruel, but absolute when the piece was touched, and long after the plates were cleared and the piano stopped playing. The lesson remained, seated in Harlem's memory. You could test Bumpy Johnson, but you couldn't move him.